Marriage is grand. Divorce, 10, 20, 30, could be 50 grand or more. So why is it that in the wake of a horrible divorce I had in my early 20s, when my son was only a year old, I feel like I've won the lottery and I wouldn't actually change my past? I want to introduce you to a concept I learned from a dear mentor called the hindsight window. And in brief, the hindsight window is that period of time between something really difficult happening in life and that harvesting and learning that has you recognize the gifts that were made possible by that event. Now, the duration between the event and coming through to that place of gratitude and learning, that period of time is how long you suffer. And my hindsight window was pretty long. But in that time, I learned so much that I wouldn't change my past. I learned about attachment styles. I learned about trauma, optimal communication. I learned about rituals for love. I've learned, so much. I could write a book about it. And yet, in this sharing with you about my hindsight window, I will be sharing with you the 3 cream of the crop lessons that I learned, as I desire to pass that forward so that you can shorten this window from what could be years or even decades down to like a year or less. Let's transform those patterns so that you can have a truly healthy, thriving love bond. So, just to illustrate a bit about the hindsight window and how we can learn from the past, I wanted to share with you a story about fruit trees. I've gotten into gardening over these last 10 years, and we've planted a dozen fruit trees in our yard. When we first planted these fruit trees, I wanted to talk to an expert around what do you do? How do you take care of them? And I was really surprised when I talked to the gardener, and she said, this is what you're going to do. You plant them in the ground and give them a really good strong watering, and then you're going to cut them to knee height. Now, these are gorgeous 6-foot trees. I'm going to cut them to knee height. So she said, yes, you want to do that because you are putting trees on terraces. And even if you weren't, fruit trees can grow really, really, really large. And you don't need a large fruit tree to get a lot of high quality fruit. If you cut it at knee height, you can actually have a tree that you can maintain at like 6 to 8 feet tall. That's a tree you can maintain. You can thin out the branches, you can thin out the fruit. You're not going to have fruit that's rotting at the top of a tree that you can't reach and that falls in the ground and you end up with rotten fruit everywhere. This will help you have a tree that produces really high quality fruit and does not create that kind of maintenance nightmare. Now, I am so glad I had asked her, because we now have this amazing group of small fruit trees, and they're easy to manage, and I never would have imagined cut it off at knee height. So I'm grateful for the hindsight window of the gardeners that came before me. Now, I didn't realize that we could say the universe is the master gardener. I was 23 when I felt like my life got cut off at the knees. Again, my son was a year old, and my relationship with my husband, my first husband, had deteriorated to a point where we could hardly be in the same space without conflict arising. We didn't know how to resolve that. I didn't have the tools. And so what happened instead was he started a relationship with another woman while we were still married. And I felt heartbroken, devastated, and like a victim to life. I had tried so hard to love, and yet I had failed. And I held that story for 2.5 years before my sister came to me and she said, Katrina, I can see how much you're suffering, and I know you do a lot of self-help and personal development, but I really want to recommend you go to this transformational workshop weekend. My sister's words really carried weight, because I had watched her go through the weekend, and all of a sudden she was making some of her dreams come true. She was big into music at the time, and all of a sudden she was playing with a drummer from Bjork, and it was like, what just happened to my sister? I gotta pay attention to this. So I went to this seminar weekend, and she encouraged me to fully participate. If there was an opportunity to go up on stage and get coaching, do it. So I remember that invitation coming. It was time for people who wanted to have breakthroughs to get that coaching. I remember raising my hand and just shaking in my seat and getting chosen and going up to the front. And this coach for the weekend asked where it was that I wanted to have a breakthrough, and I started to share my I'll call it a woe is me story. All of the things that my parents had done and my husband had done that set me up to have this horrible divorce, and now I was a single low-income mother just trying to figure out how to keep a roof over my head. I mean, it was some real stuff, and there was some real pain, and I knew my story well because I'd been telling it over and over. And there came a point where this woman, this facilitator, she looks at me and she goes, I get it. You are a professional victim. Sit down. Wow. Okay, well, I'm dedicated to transformation, and this transformational workshop works. I've seen it work. And the coach just told me I'm a professional victim. So I sat down with my head spinning. Professional victim. Wow. What does that even mean? And I realized that my story was all about the world doing me wrong. And that the most frequent thought in my mind was, I can't date, because who wants to date me when I'm heartbroken and I'm a single mom? I can't go to school. I don't have time. I can't pay rent. I can't. Everything was I can't. Wow. I have another choice. I can. This one shift in thinking is so powerful, to commit myself to recognizing that I can be responsible for my life. I can. It made such a huge difference that from that state of seeking to be fully self-responsible, I also started to scan my life. How is it that I created that marriage? How is it I created my own divorce? As I looked at those thoughts, as the seminar encouraged us to do, what's the story we're carrying, and how are we actually using those stories to manifest our experience of life? I recognized that my divorce had roots that went way back to when I was only 8 years old. My parents had divorced, and I was certain it was a mistake. I remember the day my dad drove away. He got in his little green Honda, pulled out of the driveway as I was standing next to my mom, my brother, and my sister, and we watched him drive down the street and make a left turn and just disappear. He moved several hours away and then moved across the country, and I started to relate to him as Uncle Dad. And in my great wisdom of being 8 years old, trying to make sense of life, I had created some beliefs that had stuck pretty hard. One was that I was unlovable. Another was that I could not count on men. Men abandon me, they leave me. And another was that women are mean, because I blamed my mother for this divorce. Now, I didn't realize that I had created these beliefs, but again, this is about the power of thought and self-responsibility. I recognized that these beliefs, then as I scanned my life all the way to this point in the seminar, these beliefs had shaped my experiences of life. I was attracting unavailable men. I was attracting men who could not be there for me. And my relationship with women just wasn't working, and I didn't know why. So as I owned that I had made this up as an 8-year-old, and I chose to drop that and start to find evidence for where men did show up for me And women were kind and very, very worth spending time with and getting to know better. Those relationships started to shift. It also gave me the opportunity to really scan my relationship with my ex-husband. And where I had thought I was a victim, I started to look at where I had created my own divorce. What had I done in that relationship that pushed him away? Where had I been less than kind, respectful, and considerate, devotional, loving? I found plenty, and it was a very humbling experience. So there's a combination here. The first piece being self-responsibility. And self-responsibility, a piece of self-responsibility is to really watch. What am I thinking? What are my beliefs? What are the stories I tell myself repeatedly? Am I in the I can't? Or am I willing to go into the I can? Am I in the life happens to me? Or am I in the I am the creator of my life? So this is piece number one. Now, fast forward, this supported me quite a bit in starting to feel like, okay, I can create my life. However, I still had pretty intense conflict with my ex-husband for many years. It was really hard for me to try and figure out how do we clean up the mess that we've created. And our son was experiencing the consequences of our disharmony. There came a point where I came across the teachings of nonviolent communication, and I was blessed to receive a gift from a friend who sponsored a mediated nonviolent communication session between myself and my ex-husband. I was in a place that felt quite desperate, and I really needed to renegotiate our child custody time and child support. And I didn't want to go through the courts, but I didn't know what to do. I could not continue with the agreement as it was. So my ex-husband, knowing that the courts were the other option, agreed to sit down for this mediation. However, our habit had been that we still couldn't make it 15 minutes or half hour without falling into conflict. Usually me in tears and him in anger, but I probably had angry outbursts as well. So he walks into this mediation and says, "You've got me for a half hour. That's all I can guarantee." 3 hours later, he was still there. And we had cleared through so much of the pain of the past that we were able to look into each other's eyes and say, "I love you, and I really want what's best for you and for our son." Now, this is a much better foundation for finding solutions that worked for both of us. And how did that happen? It was through empathy. This is a cornerstone of nonviolent communication. So as we went back and forth, I had a tendency to say, "Hey, I've got pain over this decision you made, or that decision you made. This is what's not working for me." And rather than him going into the defensiveness like he had habitually done, the facilitator guided him to consider what I was feeling and what I was needing, and vice versa. When he expressed like, "Hey, Katrina, you did this thing. That didn't meet my need for support or respect. You did this thing." The facilitator guided me to seek to understand his feelings and needs. And I can't tell you how magical it is when somebody takes the time to listen to you and connect with you and understand on that energetic level. There's a healing that occurs. In fact, Sarah Payton, who blends nonviolent communication with neurology, has seen that it's like these little microsurgeries happen in the brain. It will actually change neuropathways to heal something that's old and give space for something new. So in this 3-hour facilitated dialogue, we were able to clear so much of the pain of the past that we felt true love again and had the ability to co-parent. So bringing all of this forward, I am grateful because I've learned these core lessons that support healthy, thriving relationships. And of course, there's so much more than what I've shared with you here, but I want to let you know that these pieces, this full self-responsibility, this really watching your thoughts, empathy, and in the full self-responsibility, taking action, being proactive to say yes to life, yes to being the co-creator, and also yes to finding the win-win, right? When you understand your own needs and you understand the needs of another, in this case, my ex-husband, my son, then we can start to find solutions that are going to work for everyone. And that becomes sustainable, joyous, and really serves love. And when you create that skill with one person, it will permeate your relationships. And so I'm very grateful that I've had that opportunity. I have now been with my husband for over 10 years. We've been married for almost 4. And having applied these skills for so long, it's actually very rare that we have any kind of conflict. We have things to work out, and every once in a while, there's some place where we really don't agree and we need to work it through. However, there's a sense of smooth sailing, ease, flow, and attunement that is so sweet that I now know that the happily ever after is possible for anyone. So to give you an example of this, one of the challenges that we needed to find our way through in our relationship is that I have a tendency to be an extrovert. I really love people and I thrive in group environments. Now, my husband, on the other hand, is much more of an introvert. Being in large groups can feel exhausting for him. And so I want to go out. I want to have these celebrations. I want to travel. I want to go to large events like Mind Valley. And he's like, ooh, not my thing, but I also don't want to be alone, right? I've been his person. He's got some other friends that he enjoys, but it's been a challenge for him to go, okay, I've got enough social support that I feel wonderful when you're gone. Now, in the beginning, when this happened, if I didn't have this training, my thoughts would be, oh, he's trying to control me. He doesn't want me to live my life. I can't do anything, right? And go back into that I can't and feeling like a victim. But instead, I was able to watch my thoughts and go, okay, I'm feeling frustrated because I really need to have community. And I recognize that he needs empathy for what he's going through. He doesn't want to feel that sense of aloneness for too long while I'm gone. And I want to care for his needs too. And so with that, and it took some time, we really sought to cultivate relationships and experiences and ways that he can feel like his cup is full while I'm gone. And again, it was a practice and cultivation, but we came to a point where I now, if I say, hey, there's this thing I want to go to and it's really lighting me up and there's lots of people, so I don't think it's your thing. He's like, great, when is it? And so, on that note, I threw Mind Valley out as an example. Mind Valley is this, great gathering that happens with personal development and, everything's from health and fitness to relationship to entrepreneurship. And it's like lots of people come together, all these digital nomads. And it's just this wonderful experience that I've been wanting to have for a long time. And this last summer I got to do that for the first time, and it just felt thrilling and even more wonderful because I knew my husband was in really good shape during that time. So sometimes there can be things in a relationship that feel impossible. It's like, how on earth are we going to bridge this? And yet when you can be fully self-responsible, you can watch your thoughts, you stay in the I can, in the win-win, miracles can happen. You really can work through things that seem impossible. It does take practice and persistence, but it's so well worth it. And so with that, I wish to leave you with one of my favorite Rumi quotes. And it's this: your task is not to seek love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself you've built against it. May your life blossom with sweet, sweet love.